This week, we're continuing our series on reading to learn languages. So, as we talked about some of the really basics of learning how to read in our own language and then using that to read to learn a new language, we shared some practical tips for beginners and some ways to not get overwhelmed or frustrated when you're reading a new language. But they don't help you at all if you don't know how to read. So I wanted to share the story of Korean, Hangul. And of course, the early writing systems were based on Chinese characters, as you see some left over in Japan. And when I lived in Japan, I learned that in order to just be able to read a newspaper, just which is written at a fourth grade level in the United States, a person has to have the equivalent of a university level education to be able to read all of their scripts, right? I mean, it's super fascinating and interesting, but it's so difficult to read Japanese. And there, of course, there's kanji, there's, all the different systems, and you have to learn how to use all of that together to be able to access information. So King Sejong, who, very important in the history of their writing system, and I've heard different versions of this, that he and him was a scholar and he himself invented the writing system, or that he basically commissioned a group of people. I'm not really sure which is true. I actually taught languages at Sejong University. I worked for the foundation, and I I I, I want to say that he was given credit based in their foundation, but I've heard different versions that he sat and did it in a short amount of time, or he basically commissioned a group of people or got a group of people to do it, um, to work with him doing it, really. I say commission, but really just to help him out with it. I'm not really sure which is true, but I think it's irrelevant because whoever came up with it, it was absolutely brilliant. They enjoy a very high rate of literacy. And I just have some examples of some content that I made. I learned how to read Korean from riding the subway. So every morning I would just, everything was in English, Korean English, and Hangul, and I just made those connections, and it's deceptively easy. I'm not going to get into the mechanics of it, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to learn how you have to learn to read before you can read to learn in a language. And it's one of the factors that makes everything so much more difficult in languages like Mandarin and Japanese. And I also think that it's important just to be able to know that you're just going to have to factor in a lot of extra time specifically dedicated to learning how to read and write. And I wanted to share one resource, which is amazing, this script hacking by Judith Meyer. Um, I believe she is from Germany and works in computational linguistics, but it's really brilliant and simple. So she's got her, you have to learn these different alphabets, and she takes names of cities, etc. And so you'll learn from familiar words the script in different languages. Really super clever. I know there's a million apps out there, and they vary depending on what language you want to learn, but this has been a great resource. But regardless of the script, or I'm sorry, the resource that you learn, I think it's important to know that the first step in learning how to write, because learning how to write and learning how to read have a lot of reciprocity. The writing comes later. You're going to have to spend a lot of time copying, right? Just literally copying, kind of like we did when we were just starting school. We had our journals. We were copying things from the board, things we saw, until we could create ourselves with language. If you know of any great apps to learn how to read different scripts, I'd be thrilled if you'd share them with in the comments. There's really just too much to cover in one video. I think it's more helpful to do it by, by language, these apps by language, those apps. The script hacking that I talked about earlier is available in a growing number of languages, I believe. There's a fair number. So if you know of resources like that that have availability in lots of languages or some great resources in just a couple, that would be great. Next week, we're going to talk all about accessing culture through reading. So until next time.